of which this is the Gandhi Ashram for natural farming. And special thanks to Ravish Bhai for making, opening and sharing his farm like a trustee, like our notion of trusteeship. And of course, just because it goes without saying, the incredible role that Manjunath has played in bringing us all together today. My name is Jill Amma, Jill Behem in North India. I'm sorry I don't speak Karnataka. I speak some Hindi, but because I've worked for about 35 years in North India. I have worked with P.V. Rajgopal. You may know, some of you know him. He actually was at the inauguration of this building last April, and I'm happy 10 months later to come and see all the work that is going on here. So what I think this is a historical moment for us to be talking about MSP. The moment has been grasped by all of you to come together. And of course, an outgrowth of this long, well over a year-long farmers movement in Delhi, which was world recognized, I think, as one of the great movements, farmers movements, bringing farmers' issue not only back into the center of policy making, but also reminding many other countries of their farmers' issues as well. So MSP has come before us. But as someone who remembers, being an old lady, remembers back in 2000, when we began to see, because we were working on land issues at the time, and we saw more and more corporate agriculture, more and more contract agriculture coming, and we saw more and more people, small and marginal farmers, becoming landless. They were becoming landless. The landless people we have today used to be small and marginal farmers. And they didn't have the benefit of those supports. And you know, just because Dinesh raised this issue of landlessness and labor, I just would like to say that you know, many of the landless people that were small and marginal farmers who have become wage laborers and work for substandard wages either on agricultural fields or go for industrial labor are the very people we saw walking back from Delhi in the first wave. You know, people walking for thousands of kilometers. So the poverty that has hit our farmers, the impoverization, has been huge. And I just raised this point because I know it's not directly related to MSP, but I raise it to say that we've got to think of poverty a little more holistically, or rather we need to see price as very important, a very important point of advocacy, but we need to see it in a context of people's development. And if we don't see it in the larger framework of people's development, then we tend to just rile up farmers to fight for more price for me without thinking of the development of farmers in this country, and many of those farmers have lost livelihood and are very poor and marginalized today, right? So just one final thing. In that 2000 period when we began to see contract farming and corporates come into agriculture, they were also saying to us who were working in the land issue, you should not be allowing the parceling of land into smaller and smaller parts, because this is not good for agriculture. We need to consolidate land. And many people bought these arguments. One has to demystify not only the arguments that come up around land, but also come up around agriculture. So I just wanted to make that first point and say that because one has seen this trajectory from the 90s, as Vandana, Shiva, and many others have said, we've seen this trajectory over 25 years, and P.T. John said, we've seen violence, we've seen structural violence, and it's within that context that we need to see how to restore the dignity and respect for people with their land, not just price, but respect and dignity. Now, moving on to the more specific MSP arguments, I think I have been fascinated by so much as what has been said today in terms of diversity of crops, because the small pieces of land which we've been involved in the distribution of have gone to kitchen gardens, have gone to small, diverse croppings, and of course have been very, very important for raising the economy of many, many Adivasis and people who really need food because they suffer hunger. So I would like to say that there is something, I think I'll just stand now. There is something that we have learned something I don't know if it'll be useful for the advocacy for MSP, but we have learned that you have to work on two levels at the same time. You have to prevent or stop the corporatization, not stop the corporatization of agriculture, but raise and make transparent the corporatization of agriculture while we're working on with small scale producers, farmers, agro-processors. Yeah. So we call it both a preemptive step, but also an active step. And the reason that that's important in any advocacy is because if we begin, even at the local level or at the state level, if we go to the Karnataka government for purposes of getting MSP into this Tumkur district, no? It's very important to see that there's other vested interests at play that one has to also be aware of and try to disarm those other vested interests while you're doing this. So it's a kind of, you have to learn to tap your head and rub your stomach at the same time. Yeah? You need to, what Rajgopal often calls, plug the system as you work on promoting this very important price for farmers. And so that is one thing we've learned. The other thing that I think is extremely interesting is this notion that we have to be aware of both top-down and bottom-up. So I'm just going to take zero-budget agriculture as an example of natural farming. I heard what Leo said in terms of being, perhaps something that has lots of complications. It's nuanced. But the reason I found it interesting is that some of the natural farming techniques, like I'll just take zero-budget farming as the example, where it was so interesting as a process, not in terms of, as a process, it managed to create pedagogies locally. It did, in other words, peer-to-peer farmers learning. It passed these technologies from farm to farm through showing what I'm doing here, you can do there in this agro-zone. Yeah? And I think we really need to learn from the techniques, because the zero budget farming, way it worked, there was no office, there was no budget, it was all passed by the word of mouth. And I have to say, there's, tens of millions of zero budget farmers in India today. Maybe that's exaggerated. But I know for a fact that 6 million were supported by the Andhra Pradesh community group there. So what I'm trying to say with this example is that we need in our MSP to work at the local level to convince farmers they need to engage in groups, of course, in their communities, and we need peer learning, we need to build charismatic or good leadership, we need to help as much as possible with resources and support for that, but we need to try to tune it with some of the advocacy with the, say, Karnataka government for more decentralization. So, bottom up, top down. And I would like to finally say, as an argument, building on what Biju said, and Biju is really an amazing thinker on the whole WTO, the Agreement of Agriculture. But no matter how much we work on this MSP, there's a resistance. There are adverse global policies, and they're very powerful. And we did, Vijay doesn't know this, but we just completed, when we were on our Jai Jagat campaign, one of our big peace campaigns, and we were working with an Institute of Development Studies in Geneva. We said, you know what? Your World Trade Organization is killing our small producers. Please give us research from your angle on this subject so you can take it to your policymakers, which they did. Be happy to share this research with Biju and others. And the problem is they so clearly saw that the Agreement on Agriculture needs to be renegotiated. They clearly saw that MSP has to be outside the calculations, right, of what is acceptable subsidies and so on. And I think that we need to back up, this group needs to also back up Biju's work to work at that level, because if that's not happening at the same time, it's going to be very counterproductive to us at the local level. So in conclusion, I want to say that the presentations here today have been very enlightening, and I think we should see this as the first step. We should come together, others should come together. We should build a larger and larger forum where people can really stand behind this MSP, but to see it with a broader objective of India's development and not just more price for me as a farmer. And so I thank you for giving me a little bit of time. And again, thank you, organizers.